So here's something, right? I'll first introduce this thing. I wanted to do a hangout for learning professionals. I refuse to call ourselves instructional designers and anything related to just instruction, right? And Brendan knows that, Dolly knows that. But I did one a few months ago, and I did it open to anybody in public. So you can imagine how well that went. Yeah, we got all kinds of people joining, dropping. The connection was horrendous. So I wanted to try this again. And I was talking to Bonnie this past week, and I'll let her introduce herself. I guess everybody introduce themselves here. And she thought that the subject that she had would be fit for this forum again, and I wanted to give it another try and see if it works. So I invited just you guys. You're part of my privileged circle of instructional design, learning, technology, social media, etc. gurus that I have on Google+. Unfortunately, a lot of you joined me. I'll start by introducing myself here. My name is Enzo Silva, for those of you that don't know me. I'm an instructional designer currently working at Success Factors, and some of you may know I have a lot of interest in emerging technology applied to learning. So I like to have fun when I'm designing something, so I like to always, and sometimes that adds to stress actually, I like to always experiment with the latest and greatest out there to see what we can do for our learners. Now, maybe let's go from right to left, and at least what I can see here. So, Kay, would you mind introducing yourself too?
Oh, my goodness me. Why would I be? Yeah, I'm right to left, I guess. Kay Wood. I'm in Atlanta right now. Work for a group called the Abrion Group. Supposed to be working right now, I guess. This is an early lunch for me. I am a performing and learning consultant with them, and currently on a major project working with USAA in San Antonio. So this week is a bench week for me, and I'm catching up on some things, and wanted to try this out, see how it works, because I'm going to have a large team of learning professionals working with me on this major project. And I want to see how well this Google Hangout works for next year in dealing with all these many people I've got to work with.
Oh, cool. Glad we can experiment together here. And we do need to have that coffee together sometime.
Yes, we do.
Dolly, would you mind introducing yourself now?
Sure. So my name's Dolly Joseph. I sort of got into this circle because I served on the board of NASAGA, which is the North American Simulation and Gaming Association. So my background is working mostly in the K-12 area, but I've also done some consulting in the corporate sector. I guess you could say I kind of hate that, but my true love is with working with kids, and I particularly work with low-income kids at a nonprofit.
Oh, sweet. Now we have Chris.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Sager, and I'm friends with Brandon and Dolly. I'm currently the executive director of the North American Simulation and Gaming Association. Before that, I retired last year as the director of performance improvement for American Red Cross Disaster Services, and managed training and other performance support tools.
Thank you. And we have Brian. We're just doing a short introduction.
Yeah, my name is Brian Lowndes. I'm Manager of Talent Development. I work for Bonnie Simi, who's coming up shortly. We're exploring social media and simulations here at JetBlue, and I just wanted to see what we have in the space.
Thank you. Brandon Carson.
Hey, everyone. Good to be here. This is my second Google Hangout, so it's kind of interesting how it works. I'm right now working with the Interactive Entertainment Group at Microsoft, so I'm kind of a part of the Xbox group, and we're training our call agents and tech support folks that deal with the customers who buy Xbox, that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm currently doing that as a contractor.
And we have Bonnie. I think she's going to be directing a lot of the questions that we have here during the hangout, actually, based on the need that she has. I wanted to make this a real problem thing, and she brought us the problem. Now we solve it.
So thank you, Enzo. This has been an exciting just to get this thing started. I'm the Vice President of Talent at JetBlue Airways, and overseeing our talent development and organizational effectiveness teams, along with a variety of other, like our talent acquisition. And my vision was, in terms of learning in the corporate learning environment, it's no longer just this classroom and you just instruct in a classroom, very much peer-to-peer. And so we're out there looking at the in social learning atmosphere, and I want to create a platform and a program to connect all of our crew members. We have 14,000 crew members, and whether they are frontline or they are the CEO, how can we collaborate and learn together? So when I was searching for experts on this, I went to the web and I saw a talk that Enzo had, and it went to his blog, and actually, Brandon, you were in there too. And so Enzo and I actually started talking about it. I said, I'm going to post a job for an instructional designer to help me think through this. But all of my job descriptions are outdated and old, so I don't know what the new instructional designer would be. He said, let's go out and create one. So that's how this hangout started. He says, let's just put it out there and let's crowdsource this and figure out what is the future of a learning professional in the social learning in space.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think So one thing that I would like to do here is Google Hangout doesn't seem to have a raise your hand type of feature, but I would like to make this, we're all colleagues, we all know each other here pretty much, so let's make this informal and just do it as an open mic. Whenever you have something to say, just chime in, let's see how that works.
Enzo, can you start so if the ultimate goal is to actually have a job description, why don't we start a Google Doc and we can actually maybe end up with a job description for Bonnie at the end of the day?
She actually,
then she can hire all of us.
Yeah, that's true. And we could all fly. She actually did that for us. That is the goal. And so the goal of this is to come up with a description of what in 2020 or next year, or first let's examine the current definition of an instructional designer, particularly at JetBlue, which shares a lot of the common definition that we see out there. And then come up with a job description. That's exactly the idea here. And if you wouldn't mind, could you share that with us, Bonnie, the link with everyone here? I think it's public, right?
Yes, it's public. I'm not exactly sure how to do it from the. Maybe you can, because you're a little bit more familiar with how to do it with the Hangout.
I just pasted it in chat on the right.
Oh yeah, there it is. I have it now.
I think you can open it directly on the page.
You should be able to open it. When you just click on the link, and you should be able to open it up, and we can do it live. And
what I would like to do is open it up inside of this, but Google Docs doesn't seem to let me find exactly what I want. What's the title of the document? Would you mind?
It's called Outdated Instructional Designer Job Description. How's that?
Funny.
So, Enzo,
it's not here.
Yeah, you're right.
It's strange.
I've got it open from the link that someone pasted.
Yeah, so you probably just have to, minimize your screen.
And you guys, once you open it, there's a comment.
I'm creating,
right?
So I'm creating shared notes here. I'm exploring something. I hope it will work here. Maybe can you guys see my screen here? These notes that I'm sharing.
Not really.
So Enzo, actually,
yes,
I was able to find it. I was able to open it in the window. Does everybody see that?
Yeah, I can see it where Enzo used to be. There's a document now.
Okay.
Oh, I don't see that.
You have to.
It kind of went away.
But I think maybe,
Yes.
yeah, you could just put side-by-side screens. That's what I've got. I've got the Google Doc on one screen, and then you all on the other one.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Let's do that. Let me
But
minimize
I was
this.
hoping that someone could screen share, and we could.
But there is a way to do that. If you click on Google Drive on the left-hand side and search for the title, which was outdated instructional design, it doesn't show up immediately, but
Oh, that's what
There it
happened.
is.
Okay, it is there. I see. Thank you, Dolly.
Okay.
Yes.
So Dolly gets hired now because she can figure
Yeah.
out technology.
There you go.
and
Done.
I'm a loser.
We don't need to describe the job anymore. She got it. So there it is. I hope all of us can annotate live here and see what happens here. That's my hope. Let's see.
I don't know that.
So can I, while we're struggling with this, can I just share a kind of an example that might help? I don't know if it'll help lead the discussion at all or not, but I'll share an example. So one of the last companies I worked with was Yahoo, and they were in 2009. They hired a position called a Chief Learning Officer because they didn't actually have a formal training organization until 2009. And so she was hired to create and design a formal training organization for the company for employee training. And the CEO at the time asked this person to not create a traditional shared service model of a training organization that kind of had this huge, like in some environments you'll see a training organization serve as a catalog of just general learning for all employees, like professional development and job specific and all that. She didn't want the training organization to become that. She was more interested in the training organization aligning to specific business imperatives. So she wanted kind of an agile and nimble function, if you will, that directly supported a business that needed something that she could offer in the training realm. And so that's kind of a different construct from a lot of the larger organizations. I don't know how JetBlue is organized, but the great thing about that was she was able to really find out what the imperatives were for the business, to identify those, and to build a function that would directly support just those, instead of taking a year or two to build this elaborate construct, that would kind of try to solve all of the company's problems through training. So that might be one thing that I'm finding in a lot of instructional design roles, is really getting a more direct impact to a specific business function. And they didn't have any competency planning, they didn't have any job architecture aligned to specific training initiatives at all, and they just didn't find that was going to be important. Whether it's good or not, I don't know. That evaluation may come later, or may have come later, but they really weren't interested in kind of that helicopter strafe that training sometimes can do. They were more interested in being nimble and granular.
And that's exactly something that's happening where I work right now. Is a whole organization was raised to solve specific business goals, and so everything that we do is lined up directly to the business needs and the goals of the business, and that is an ideal way to do things for us. We know exactly the outcomes of what we are creating, how they impact the actual business and the people that work there. So
yeah. So if you look at the summary, developer acts as a planner to continue to support the company's continued growth. I mean, to me that's just jargon, because yeah, obviously you'd want to do that. But I think that I don't know what developer means, but I think the instructional designer, and this is something we struggle with at Sun, Enzo. I don't know if you'll remember this. We had this debate on whether or not the instructional designer had to have some level of subject matter expertise in whatever function they were helping to support. And part of the strategy at Sun, which was a technical company, was to not hire instructional designers, people with degrees in learning theory and that, and experience in that, but to convert subject matter experts to people who could assemble training. And so I think you have a balance of, well, do you look for people, like for instance, in sales training, do you look for people who have experience in sales, or do you look for people who have more of an more formal training in instructional design, but also the aptitude to build relationships with subject matter experts? And does your organization support that cross-functional collaboration. Because if you need to be real about that. If it doesn't, then you need to really understand that.
So Brandon, I think you're bringing up a really good point. In what we are doing at JetBlue is converting our or training a lot of our current learning professionals in the subject matter area. So one of our we have a special program just for leadership for pilots, and we had one of our leadership facilitators spend a week and a half in pilot training. He's not going to become a pilot in a week and a half, certainly, but he certainly then understands their needs and such. I think for us, what we're looking for in this instructional designer, and just it's not so much the content per se. It's more where we want to go is we're thinking of how do we create social learning where it's not, and it's not even, it's real time. It's the type of conversations that we're all having here. And if I want to learn about a particular topic, it's facilitating those conversations and in bite-sized chunks. So maybe I'll have my CFO. We're moving towards a metric of return on invested capital. Well, most of our leaders don't know what that is. So he could then host and maybe put out a 3-minute video on it, and then we'd have a conversation around it. Well, this, in my mind, this designer learning would facilitate the learning around it. It's building that concept of changing from classroom. That's what we're thinking of. I'm curious what you guys think of that.
Well, it's funny. I'll let Dolly and I were just talking about this morning, and I won't talk too much on this. I'll let other people jump in. Mm-hmm. But I was at Adobe a couple weeks ago, and that kind of thing came up. They're doing a leadership program, and they were concerned that the classroom event, which was 3 or 4 days, would have has a beginning and an end. And they're like, we want to build a social platform so people can continue the dialogue and continue the learning. And my only comment back to her was, you probably are going to create something that's not needed and that people are already doing. I'm sure they're already having that dialogue and that conversation somehow. So why do you think, as a learning professional, you need to get in the way of that? And so we were talking about that this morning. And sometimes we use this term social learning as a conduit of we as instructional designers needing to do something about it. I don't know that that's always the case, that we need to be involved in that.
Brandon, Chris, I agree with you. When I worked as the director of performance improvement at the Red Cross, there was SharePoint happened to be the kind of social platform that the organization used, and essentially, my group just helped subject matter experts learn about SharePoint a little bit, and then turned it loose. And the looser it was, the better it was. I mean, for everybody. I mean, they the subject matter experts in a variety of disciplines now had a way to interact with their constituents out in the field, and frankly, it reduced the drain on the performance improvement staff, so they could invent their own little programs for whatever they needed, and didn't come to us and say, oh, you need to write training about this. So there was a lot of benefit, and I think your point's well taken. They find ways of communicating with their folks and follow those trends, and they don't want us inventing.
So Bonnie, what I would say is, we as instructional designers should probably be less involved in, quote, social learning, and more involved, because that's going to happen anyway. Humans are inherently social. They're going to figure out a way to dialogue and probably use the platforms that are in front of them. Mobile, probably. There are smartphones and stuff. What we should probably be more focused on is being able to report back to the business that they have a competent workforce. We should be more involved, I think, this is my own opinion, we should be more involved in ensuring that the workforce is competent, that the people there are able to do their jobs and bring back that ROI through, correct levels of assessment, certification, accreditation, all of that. That's the formal in what we do. I think we focus too much on informal as instructional designers. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I see. The thing is, I totally agree with you guys. Is people will find a way to have a conversation, and imposing a way to do it is not the right way to do it. Calling it social learning, even to me, I kind of cringe at social learning because learning is social no matter what, right? We see so many of you guys experts saying, right, learning is social. So why are we adding the word social behind learning? So
I mean, not to slam anyone, but I worked at Motorola last year in sales training, and they had a quote certification program. I'm using air quotes, and it was so bad because none of the instructional designers together could put together a rigorous enough assessment to really validate someone's certification to be a salesperson at the company. And instead, we were just cranking out articulate-based slideware of product information. And my argument was, can we just stop doing this and start doing a more rigorous certification so the business knows they have a salesperson that can actually sell a product?
I think a lot of the things that we're going to be doing at JetBlue are a little less tangible. It's really more around leadership, where there is no right or wrong. And the idea of creating a compelling place for people who are geographically dispersed to come together and have those types of conversations. Right now, we don't have that type of a unifying platform.
So I think a balance, balance is always good. I'm not saying that we have the power to, we can control really. If we put a question out there, if we say put a contest, whoever puts up the nicest tutorial about how to use our product to do X wins a prize. We can control the fact that people will or not participate. But we can try to help instigate conversation around things.
Well, you know,
go ahead.
So Bonnie, and I'm sorry, I didn't get the gentleman's name.
Brian.
Or Brian. So at Yahoo, we did a very similar thing, and I should send you guys a write-up that we did about it because we had a leadership. So I told you guys about the CLO that came in. The first year, since they had no formal training there at all, the first year she focused on leadership development, management training, because they had had none of that. And so she put together a program, and then she wanted to do kind of what she struggled a little bit with, kind of what I think you guys are struggling with, and she wanted to build this or create this area where the dialogue could continue. And so we didn't have a platform either, and so we piloted Jive and we piloted Salesforce.com. And so what we found was varying levels of, quote, success throughout this pilot, if you will. And what I can do is I'll send you that information, because at the end of the day, we came out with some do's and don'ts that would be just maybe tips and tricks or best practices. Because a lot of it didn't work, and some of it did work really well. And because there's really, it can be difficult in an enterprise organization to adopt, quote, a new platform, for one thing. That's like at Yahoo, it would take about a year to bring in a new software platform. There's just so much that has to happen at a higher level. So there's issues there, and then there's the expense, and then so there's the technical and budget issues, but then there's the whole like human behavior issues, right? So I'll take a note to get your guys' contact info from Enzo and send you that, or anyone in here that's interested in it actually can have that.
If it is it public information? You could post it to this community and people would see a link. Maybe you add it as a Google Doc or whatever it is, and just share within this community.
Oh, okay.
If it is public,
I think it's okay because there's nothing proprietary to it at all.
And so, Brandon, I'm curious, as you think, as you and you were working with the CLO on this, if what was your role, or so whether it's piloting things or pulling things together, just acknowledging that it's something other than classroom-based learning, but tying that in, what would the role of that person be? And what would and that's kind of what we're looking for. I call it instructional designer because I don't know what else to call it.
Well, so it was interesting. It was tough because we were so from an instructional design standpoint, we had to create, and actually we created an app on Salesforce.com that was what we call a learning action plan. So we had to create a way that an instructional designer could build an experience on the platform. So one, there had to be training on the platform. We had to figure out how to use the platform. From an instructional design perspective, we had to figure out what we could do on the platform. Then we built an app on the platform so that we could have instructional designers recreate create these communities of learning, communities on the platform. So you had to bring your instructional design expertise to a, like you just said, it's really a social platform, and you had to figure out some of the social utilities and kind of how they could be, leveraged in a way to further, the instructional validity of what you're doing, right? Because like one thing the CLO said is we're not going to just build these programs for the hell of it. There has to be, we're not in here to build a Facebook. We're not just going to, hey, everyone come together, right? That's not what we're doing. We're obviously supporting, some kind of, knowledge inquiry or that kind of thing. So
I think I was going to jump on Enzo. What you just said, Brandon, is this community of learning, and it reminds me of a blog post, Enzo, that you had about a community manager, and maybe that's what this is an instructional community manager. Maybe you could explain what your blog about.
So yeah, that's a good point that you brought up. I think what I posted was a rant about how people try to define a lot what a community manager is or what an instructional designer is and all that, but I think we all should have that mindset of community managers, because when we put something out there, people are going to start talking about it, bad or good. So let's just have that mindset that what we're trying to do is instigate conversation around content, for example. Instead of trying to impose conversations, let's instigate conversations that are interesting and relevant to the people, and always have that mindset.
The thing is, that didn't work for it. So it didn't work for, in this situation, for us to have a, quote, community moderator / instructional. That didn't work. You needed, the community moderator needed to be someone that was closer to the actual community.
Right, in the
The instructional, because there's a credibility factor there, right? And believe me, people look for, especially in a leadership situation. We had this at NetApp when I was there. I used Jive to build a social learning community for executives, and it didn't work because executives are too politically correct about what they're going to discuss in a community that they don't know who can have insight into that community. Human behavior is a little weird when they get online and they know that these breadcrumbs are on a server somewhere, and you're a VP or you're an SVP, it's just a little different. And especially if you have levels of hierarchy that may be in the community together, a direct, someone who's looking at, oh, I know my boss is in this room, they're going to speak a little differently. So we kept our moderators at the more of the business function, and we had instructional designers who really did just design the learning experiences. And you'll see in this thing I share, like we had regular learning experiences, like you had prescribed activities that you had to go engage in, and those kinds of things. And we kept the ID to that role.
I have a comment going back to something that Brian said a while back about that some of this is leadership skills. Is that right? And sort of more soft skills. Is that some of the focus for what you want to build?
Yes.
Okay, so I come at it I work at a mentoring program, and so one of the things that we're constantly trying to work with is how do we measure what the students are gaining? Sort of like they're in middle and high school. So how do we know that they're actually learning anything from these mentors? And so I think that you can build measures to evaluate whether or not people have these soft skills. You can identify them, you can nurture them. And so I think that you naturally have leaders as people get promoted and continue through the business. But I think what the instructional designer does is that they actually help codify and model those behaviors for people. You can't have an instructional designer necessarily telling a VP like this is what you need to work on, but you can have that documentation out there saying these are the areas that people need to work on, and you give them to the managers of the of the people who need to work on their skills. And so that they're providing, it's not sales training, it's not tech training, but you can train for soft skills, and you can. That's what an instructional designer can do, because you don't have time as the VP of whatever to build those documents.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say something. I want to emphasize something that Brandon said about not having the instructional designer kind of like own this. What we're doing at USAA is a lot of huge program on where we're measuring competencies of salespeople rather than everybody's going through at their own pace. So there's a lot of challenges in it, but we have a lot of interaction that doesn't fall into the classroom. There's mentoring, there's what they call Y-cording, listening in to current, what they call member services reps now, and how do we record that? How do we measure what they're getting out of that? It proves to be very difficult since they have a certification program. They want to know that everybody's certified and they're measuring it against standards in the LMS and that sort of thing. We've determined for all these social pieces that somebody in the line of business has to own it. Somebody that is respected in the line of business, totally outside of training, the instructional designer, the learning, whatever, learning.
Right.
Because if they don't, no one's going to participate.
Right. So, Kay, to your point, like when we were doing an Enzo, you might remember this. When we were at Sun, we were, there was this guy who invented Java. I forgot his name, Gosling, something like that. So when you're putting together a curriculum, there's no better source of truth than hearing from the person who created it or who is a perceived expert in the enterprise. And so what we were trying to do is bring, we're not the source of truth. The learning function is not the source of truth. And so what you want to do in this particular situation is bring the source of truth in and then have an instructional design. And any of us who are instructional designers and have never seen a social platform, it wouldn't take us long because at the end of the day, to Dolly's point, it's really about knowing how people learn. So if you combine that perceived expert or that expert, and sometimes perception is more than reality, but if there's a perceived expert in play, you're probably going to get a higher level of engagement from the participants, because who doesn't want to hear from the expert, right, in the function, in the business, versus just a facilitator that they don't know. I think you should combine. So I think the instructional designer role is still what we go to school to learn, right? It's still what our graduate programs bring us. That skill set is so needed, and it's not always respected. And then you combine that with the expert.
And I think that's a great point. The thing with having a community manager mindset comes down to a lot of times our experts might not have the community management skills that we're looking for, the facilitation skills that we are looking for. So part of our role is to support them in maintaining that dialogue with the people in the program that we're creating, right? So is asking them the right questions, or what would you ask, how would you answer this question? Look, somebody just asked this question in our forum here during our boot camp program for salespeople. How would you answer that question? Making sure they're on top of things and stuff like that. But always getting a subject matter expert involved is a great thing to do.
So it sounds to me like having that maybe, the instructional designer is someone who helps frame what are the issues and such that are close to the business that need to be resolved, and then bringing in those experts, facilitating the conversation, rather than creating coursework, but it is creating the environment and bringing the experts in and facilitating the conversation in a more unified way. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I think so. I remember that in our, I went through an instructional technology program, and what our professors told us was that we were not the subject matter experts at all. That we were there to facilitate the discussion with the end user and the subject matter experts, because oftentimes the people who have that expertise aren't that good at communicating it to other people because they don't understand all the things that went into them understanding their expertise. Whereas I think the idea of the frame, that we create frameworks is key. That we say, oh, okay, we've got Bob and George, and Bob had all these strengths, and George needs these strengths, and identifying what the perfect employee is, and then trying to build that into each of them, and identify those areas of need, particularly for that position that you have, or that.
I think what you wrote over there in the chat, Dolly, is fantastic. I mean, the ID role is to illuminate what skills are needed. You illuminate those. And like at Yahoo, that was some of the struggle we had in a workforce like that, in a business that was in chaos. What we had to do was find out, assess the landscape and figure out what everyone knew and what the capabilities were, so that we could figure out what we needed to do from a training perspective to support those LOBs that had the imperatives. And they didn't know what they had. They didn't know what they were hiring talent-wise. So they didn't have competency mapping. They didn't have any of that. And I'm not saying you need to do competency mapping from the traditional model, but you need to know what you have, because you're the training function. The business looks to you to confirm or not confirm that they have a workforce that is capable of achieving whatever the business goals are at the end of the day. So you don't want your instructional designer to spend a lot of time figuring out social learning platforms for when you've got to figure out what your workforce is capable of doing.
So I'll build upon that and maybe bring it into a specific example. So we actually do have competency mapping, and we also know where globally where some gaps are. Business acumen is one of our gaps. And our finance team, and actually our whole business model, relies on us being efficient. And so if this is a competency across a lot of our leadership, and so we've identified that, and doing a class in finance is not engaging or fun or anything, and we have a leadership that's willing to experiment, including a CFO. What would the role of an instructional designer be in today's environment of learning to create that environment for building business acumen on a scalable way across 2,000 employees, using the expertise of the business, the CFO, the controller, all of them are willing to participate. How would we facilitate that conversation, and would an instructional designer be the one that would help do that?
Well, Chris, with just a quick comment on that, and builds back off of Dolly's typing over in the corner. I think it's sort of what does business acumen look like at JetBlue specifically? In other words, what would a successful manager at whatever given level do? One of the things that I did with Red Cross was we had a similar question about building kind of competencies of local Red Cross unit managers, and we built a business simulation of a Red Cross unit and said, here are the key drivers of the Red Cross unit, and managers would go in and they would make the kinds of choices that managers typically make, and the software would sort of gin up some reports for them that were similar to the kind of reports they would see, and frankly then you could see who was demonstrating business acumen, because it did produce reasonably accurate results. And being an airline, you know about some kinds of simulators and use them a lot. So the notion of John Sturman at MIT has a fun article called something like Management Flight Simulators, which goes way back. But I really think that without doing anything fancy, the first thing the instructional designer has to do is help the business leaders say specifically, what does competent performance look like? Not any fancy words or anything else. It's like, what can they actually do? That would just be my 2 cents on it. And then figure out a way to simulate that experience so that people could demonstrate they have the competency, just like your pilots demonstrate they have the competency.
So would that instructional designer do the simulation and build it?
Yeah, Dolly and I were kind of back chatting a bit, and she might can build on this, but you know, when you talk about finance or business acumen, we kind of had the same problem at Dolby. I did some consulting at Dolby a couple of years ago, and Dolby makes a ton of money without a lot of employees because it's all a subscription licensing based service. So they're kind of like this, they don't make things really. They've made a technology that just people build on that, right? And it just makes money for not doing anything in a way. And but they assessed the landscape of their employee base and found out that most of their employees didn't know how they made money and didn't understand their model and all of that. So they went on a training initiative to kind of help build that understanding, that know the business kind of stuff. And I think it's key in the knowledge workforce nowadays. Like you're saying, you need your leaders, you need everyone to understand it. And finance isn't fun. I don't know how finance, like Dolly was saying, finance may not be necessarily social. So how do you?
I think what you do is you look at humans and you look at what drives us, and competition drives us, and that, you know, from the whole gaming area, that's where I'd take in. Okay, so you in either your small class, if you have small class groups, or if you do have some kind of online thing, you build in some kind of competitiveness, whether or not it's real or not. And so you say, hey, look, you guys aren't very efficient. We need to have 80% efficiency, and you guys aren't meeting the mark. And that is part of sort of corporate culture anyhow. And you just make it explicit, and you set the benchmarks of this is what our goal is, and you know, and then the other part of competition is also cooperation. And so taking those two things in, and then I think an instructional designer, I don't think that innovation means using the latest technology. I think you can use the latest technology if it serves your learning goal. And that's one of my things is it's like, maybe we don't have to have a Facebook Lite platform for your company, but instead we say, hey, you know, what really people like about Facebook is that instantaneous thing, that casualness, the gaming. What can we insert back into our face-to-face or whatever our media is for our training? How can we take those lessons and put it back in? And I think that's what instructional designers really can do. Thoughtful instructional designers who are given a little bit of freedom can really add into their course.
That is so true, and I think you touched an amazing point. There is an instructional designer needs to more than know how to use Captivate and Articulate and whatever tool it is. An instructional designer needs to know how to facilitate learning, and I don't mean that in a cheesy way. An instructional designer needs to know, like you were saying, what motivates people. Needs to know basic principles of game design, because you know gamers, the gaming industry knows how to motivate people. We gotta admit that, right? They know how to get people to do what they want people to do in a very compelling way. So, and I think a lot of us here, I think most of us here probably, we have at least 3 people from the saga here, understand the importance of knowing game mechanics and how to build those into learning. And I'm not talking gamification in the sense of commercialism, do this and you get a badge, but something with a thought, like Dolly just said. You need to know how to put together experiences that will make people want to keep on doing it and learn from it, right?
One of the things we learned in the Yahoo thing was, and here's the thing with the social platform or any kind of thing like that, if it's not in their work stream, it's really going to be very difficult to get them to engage. So if you're going to go start a new platform that they don't know a lot about, that's not relevant to what they do in their job, you're going to have a really difficult uptake on getting engagement. It's got to be something that's in their work stream and something that is contextually relevant to what they do while they're at work at JetBlue. And so that's why you got to be real careful about a new community, a new platform. And maybe in what I found as an instructional designer is really a key element, and I know we all know this, but I'm going to hammer it home again, is to really understand not only what your audience does, you know, who they are, but what they are willing to do. I mean, Tiagi's email games are so lo-fi, but guess what? Everyone checks email. Chris just has a new email game going now using Tiagi's thing. It works because why? Everyone checks their email. So you need to be where your people are. Don't think they're going to go somewhere new, because they probably won't.
Exactly. That is a
That's
huge.
very true.
That's a huge mistake that I think all of us have made sometime in our
It was
lives.
a $150,000 mistake we made at Yahoo on the
Wow.
pilot for Jive
Yeah.
because they didn't go there and they won't go there.
And here at Success Factors, I think we have a very, my current employer, we have a very unique situation where we sell a social learning platform, a social collaboration platform, which is GEM. So it is part of what people do every day. And so we're very privileged to do that. But not everybody is going to have that. And you're right. People already are on Facebook. People already are on Twitter. How can we leverage or use what they already do, where they already are at, to design learning experiences in those environments too, right? That brings those together. Kind of like that ARG that we did for Sun a few years ago, Brandon, where we used, to some extent, we used platforms where people already were to bring in a cohesive story that, you know, got people to talk, to get together and discuss issues that they had to discuss at that conference.
Yeah.
So it's about weaving it together. So I would say an instructional designer needs to know, needs to be abreast of the latest trends and all of that, but as Dolly says, needs to know how to get people engaged with whatever technology it is. The technology is somewhat irrelevant, I would say.
So Bonnie, about you might want to look this up because it's interesting. Mozilla Foundation and MacArthur has this open badge initiative, and we had a competition back last year where different learning agencies submit their curriculum to see, you know, if it would fit into this open badge initiative idea of being able to take learning, and that no matter where you were, you would be able to complete a learning task and get badged for it. And they were trying to make it so that there was actually some learning going on, that it wasn't just that I pressed this button 10 times and then I said that I was finished with it. And I think the keys of, and I'll brag on myself just very briefly, which Computers for Kids is a very small agency, and I work with Brandon and another volunteer at our company, at our nonprofit, and we were in competition in the finalist round. We were one out of 5. There were 64 of us who went to the finals, and I think there was 500 people who competed, and we lost to Pixar and to Smithsonian. So I kind of felt like, okay, I didn't really lose because it was just really a very small team of us with small resources. But I think the key to our success that we were very clear on, we were breaking down into learning constructs what we wanted to do. We had tech skills, we had service goals, very, very specific kinds of things, and then we had levels. And if you have that framework, and it can really help anybody to know what their levels are. I feel like sometimes as instructors want to hide what the learning outcomes are, and we want to make it more mysterious than it needs to be. You really need to tell your employees or your students or whoever, this is what success means. I mean, the bottom line is for JetBlue, it's probably customer satisfaction, and they keep buying from you guys, and that you get revenues, and that you're efficient. Mapping, and Brandon and I were working on a project like this, mapping all of that for your employees is really what you're trying to do, is say, if you save $10 paper clips, all those paper clips across the company actually save up, kind of thing. But really being explicit on that, and using those frameworks to say, this is where this thing that doesn't seem to relate maps in. And I think if you look at that open badge initiative, you can see where they were bringing in this idea of giving somebody a cute little badge, a cute little thing, and validating that and sharing that across the network. That was what they were working on, and they're trying to make that an open initiative that anybody can tag into. And maybe that would give you guys some ideas, because it's all open source at this point.
Good. So very, very good. And it kind of goes along with the whole Tapestry app, right, Brendan, that Brendan is all active on the thing, where people can, and the idea of learning events, and that people can tag their own informal learning experiences. I have watched this video, etc., and make a whole paint a picture of what they have been doing that is not prescribed to them, that is contributing to their learning, to them improving their skills, etc. Now, should we? How should we do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that goes to this.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think we're at the top of the hour too, so I'll shut up, Enzo.
But we did start a few minutes late. So if you guys have 10 extra minutes, we could close with maybe what is the outcome that you want, Bonnie, from the call? Would it be a list of skills that you're looking for, and as an instructional designer, a definition of a title, what this instructional designer needs to know? Should we start a list for you or something like that, or do you have already some ideas from the conversation?
Well, I think as I had mentioned on the slide, what I'm hearing is that the instructional designer role is really around, as I said, assessing a need, helping leaders understand what good means, and then facilitating that learning. Now, of course, how you facilitate the learning is the only new part in all of this. Is that how you're facilitating it might in 2013 and 2020 might be slightly different than in 1980, but nonetheless, the other pieces about figuring out, assessing the need, and then assessing the results are somewhat the same.
Mm-hmm.
I would love and for help. So in looking at like the Google Doc, we could just use that. I just love anybody's notes after this hangout is over. Everybody has the thing, and just randomly put in some thoughts. I would be hugely helpful. Knowing that I'm going to totally change, like the job description that's listed there is so outdated, but I am seeing some things that are not outdated. Yeah. So I'd love just some comments on the Google Doc would be helpful.
And I think this really does bring it back to the beginning, right? Like you were saying, we shouldn't just toss out the idea of being an instructional designer. Even if the title is different, the basics are still there. You still need to identify the needs. You still need to tie back, be able to create a curriculum or experience or certification program, whatever it is, that ties back to the learner's needs, to the business needs, and all that. So that's still there. No matter what tool you're using, no matter what technology you're using, if it's Google Hangout or if it's a text messaging, that type of skill still needs to be there. And I think what we tend to see a lot on LinkedIn and descriptions is the instructional designer skills, Captivate, word processing, Dreamweaver, and to me, I think that kind of it's so irrelevant. Right,
Yeah.
I think so many people miss an opportunity of getting a great instructional designer, a great professional, because I don't know how to program HTML, or I don't know how to use Dreamweaver, but I do know how to use WordPress, for example. Maybe a candidate is looking at that and it's turned off by that, and it's turned away from that position by that, and it could have been a great loss because the recruiters out there are focusing on the tools and not what the people can actually do.
I don't know how to use Captivate or Articulate, so.
And you're great.
Yeah, so it's getting away from what the platform is, because you know what? The platform that it is today is not going to be the platform in 10 years, right?
Well, I think that's the main thrust, and where, we're having this discussion with the group I'm working with now about, creating samples of our work and they're focused kind of on the tools part of it. And so there's different streams in what we do. There's tool fluency, which some organizations really need that. They need to know what you know from a tools perspective because they've already adopted them and that's what they use, and you will be helping to put things together in a tool. And then there's also just fluency along, building instructionally sound materials. And so a lot of times those things will converge, and that's part of our job description nightmare now is you gotta there's several tools out there that you might need to know a bit about. I'm always tool agnostic, and I always have been, because I can learn a tool. I think if you don't have the fundamentals of how someone learns and understand that, then that's what I look for first when I'm hiring an instructional designer. What education do they have with with expertise in instructional design, and then what's their experience, and then I'll look at tool fluency if I need that.
Mm-hmm.
So is it more around? It's more around capacity to learn and intellectual curiosity than any kind of platform whatsoever. Because
Right,
the end of
because
the
to
day,
your point, a platforms come and go, right? And but they all have probably some pretty basic. And unless you're going to be needing an IT type of function in this person, I think, like you're saying, the capability to learn and work on the platform is key. Like we're hearing this discussion a lot with HTML5 right now. A lot of IDs are freaking out, building app. I got to know how to make an app. I got to know how to program HTML5 and all of that. And I'm like, I don't think so. You could
No.
spend years learning how to do that stuff.
And second, to go off of that conversation there, I think you don't need to know, unless you are curious about it and you want to learn. You don't need to know HTML5. You can always have some budget and hire somebody that can. But what you cannot find,
Well,
what you
Kay is
cannot,
making a perfect point. I see those all the time. Kay. Deep fluency and tools in.
yeah, what you cannot
Sorry, I was
pay.
interrupting you.
Yeah, it's okay. What I was going to say is that what you cannot pay for is the ability to design a good curriculum, and to know how to address the business and the learner needs. The tool, you can always hire somebody that will do that for you.
what do you think about something as basic as the title, the designer versus developer? And I'm seeing kind of on the chat there that we really think instructional designer. And get away from developer because developer talks more technology. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree that I don't like the word developer. I come from most of the work I do is in the tech industry, and so I'm probably a little clouded by that. But a developer in most industries I work in is someone who is a programmer.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It should be designer. I think the biggest thing here is do we stick to the traditional title of instructional designer, somebody that only designs instruction and training, or a learning designer that helps design experiences that help people learn. And I don't know if we can design learning, right? Learning is something that happens naturally anyway, but we can design experiences that help people learn.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be careful. I don't know. You have to be careful. There may be an HR job architecture thing you have to work within, but
yeah.
Well, that's the nice thing in my job. I oversee all of that. So if I want to change
okay.
the title, I can change the title.
You have the power. That's nice. You have power. So instructional strategist,
funny.
instructional designer, and a lot of in the real world out there, because I've been, as a contractor, I see this a lot. Sometimes I'll look at a job definition that starts with instructional designer as the title. I'll look at that as maybe a little junior, right? And meaning I've got 20 years of experience and blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's all subjective.
Yeah.
Developer, though, is just a tough one for me. I don't.
We're going to move away from that. One thing for sure came out of this, it will not have developer in the title.
Please.
And I also, in the skills, I'm going to move away from the technical platforms. That's another outcome for sure from this. And I'm definitely going to talk about the assessment, assessing the needs and assessing the results at the end. So those are, I think that seems pretty universal across this conversation. It has been very valuable for me as I'm writing this description.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad. This group of people is very sharp, all of them. And I think we should probably close, right? We're at 7 minutes at the top of the hour. But it was great. For me, it was great. My closing statement is that if my dogs let me talk, this is how informal this open mic is. Is that I want to do more of these. It's great for me to have a challenge to bring people together to discuss a real world problem instead of just coming up with let's talk about Twitter in education today, or my first hangout was let's talk about using Google Plus, Google Hangouts for learning, and that didn't turn out really well, I don't think. But thank you so much, Bonnie, for the opportunity, for being open to discussing this like this, and to being to posing us a problem that we could help you solve, hopefully. And let's keep, as we said here, somebody said it. Let's keep the conversation going beyond this finite event that is this Google Hangout. So let us take our notes on that document. I have been taking some notes here. A lot of typos because it's on the tablet, but we'll see how that goes. Let's keep the conversation going.
And I think, again, part of social learning for all of us and collaborating, I don't have any problem with this being a public. You could put it out there. You could put it on your blogs, and we can. In my way, I think for several of this was our first Google Hangout.
Roger.
So rather than doing a Hangout about how to use Hangout, you do one on a topic like this. I've now learned how to use Google Hangout.
Nice. Yeah, good. So it's like incidental learning in a way, right?
Yes.
All right. So does anybody else have some closing statements here? And I'll just close the hangout once we're done.
No, it was fun. It was great meeting you guys.
Well, thank you, Brandon.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Dolly.
And
Thank
if
you.
anybody knows of someone who might be interested in this role, once I write the job description, I'll give it all to you guys, and feel free to spread it around. We'll be posting it pretty soon.
Where are you all located?
New York City.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
bye.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. I will forward that. And have a good day, huh?
Uh-huh.
Bye.
Bye-bye.